We are live again. Welcome to the live stream show. It's a Tuesday, and today we are going to take a deep dive into the world of podcasting. And that's because I have a guest. His name is Dan Morris, and he has put together some of the most brilliant experts who are the ones who are not only podcasters extraordinaire, but each one of them have been doing different kinds of trainings on how to do podcasting. And he's put all of these folks together, and they've all offered a special program and trainings on how you can grow your podcast, how you can start a podcast, how you can reach your audience, how you can build your community, all of these things. And we're going to talk about that bundle today live. So if you've been thinking about launching a podcast, or if you have a podcast, or if you have a video podcast, or if you're doing anything like this, where you're trying to think about turning your content marketing into a show, that's basically what podcasters do. This is the episode for you. I want you to pay attention, and let's hit that intro. Whoops, there we go. Recorded live in Boston, Massachusetts, this is the Livestream Show. In a world full of underexposed entrepreneurs, the Livestream Show is your gateway to a global community of livestream pioneers who dare to go live and create something special and unexpected, which could only happen because it was live. I'm your host, Brad Powell. Let's get on with the show. All right, we're back, and welcome to the show, Dan.
Man, those skylines of Boston. I haven't been to Boston in a while, but it's by far my favorite U.S. town for sure. It is a great place.
Yeah, I like it here. What I like about Boston is the history. That there's big parts of Boston that were built by Europeans, and it's all still here. Those pieces are still here, and so nothing is straight.
That's what makes it awesome.
Sure.
It's like the exact opposite of Salt Lake City, where there is only 90-degree angles for the entire town. You could be on one street and see like 9 miles straight.
Yeah.
In Boston, you can see like 30 feet, and then there's a building.
Yeah, right. Well, I used to live out in Seattle, and Seattle is completely laid out on a grid. It's like someone took a fly swatter and just went whap.
Yeah.
And that's the downtown.
But Seattle is so hilly that you still can't see very far. It's still interesting, the grid.
That's true.
But yeah, there's nothing in the United States like Boston.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool place. Well, okay, so we are going to talk about podcasting in the world of podcasting a little bit, but you do a lot of different things. And so when someone comes up to you and it says, "Hey, Dan, who are you and what do you do?" What do you say?
Man, you know what? I almost always tailor that answer to who that I'm talking to, because Rachel and I do quite a few things. Rachel, my wife, she runs findingjoy.net. That's a motherhood blog, and it's got like 800,000 fans on Facebook. She's got a book deal with Penguin Random House, and she speaks all over. She was on the Today Show. Like that part of our world is pretty big. And then the two of us, we ran Audience Industries until COVID, and we did workshops around the world, 8-hour workshops in different cities. Wherever we wanted to travel, we put together a workshop and taught vloggers, bloggers, and podcasters how to turn their craft into a career, because that's what we've been doing for 8 years. And then we also do this. We do 2 events per year where we gather, in the one in June, we gather 65, and the one in October, this week, we gathered 41 experts that teach something, pretty cool around a subject. And this particular one is podcasting. And we create this win-win-win opportunity with one product so that everyone involved comes away with something fantastic that motivates them to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I understand. I was involved in this kit the Podcasters Kit a year ago. It was a really cool thing. But the other one, the one that you do in June, my friend Mia has been part of, and it's bigger. Like it's really all about growing a business. Like if you're wanting to grow or enhance your online business, that, it's like the golden ticket.
Yeah. It's called BC Stack. It's in June every year, and it's like 20,000 units that we sell of that. It's a big product, and that's because it's digital marketing. So it covers social media and content marketing and strategy and video and podcasting. Not podcasting much because of our October event, but because it's so broad, it has a really wide audience. And then Podcasters Kit this week, podcasting, even though, there's 2 million podcasts, kind of like blogs, it's still not quite mainstream, but we are on the very, very edge, like the last moment where it's not mainstream. So I think that it will become more and more important, like the days of Paul Harvey were in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely, it's really interesting, especially in the context of this last year and a half, in this time of social distancing, just sort of the behavioral changes that people have and just the attitude change of like what's possible. I mean, what you're describing earlier in your business of doing a lot of in-person events and having to pivot to like creating, a whole new way of operating our businesses in this past year. And I know I've gone through, like, I am in the world of live streaming, and up until, a year ago in the spring, I was doing lots of live events, and that was a big, I was literally attaching myself to a couple conferences that were like a movable feast going from city to city, and I would go with those events and be there for the setup and for the whole thing through and live stream the whole thing. And abruptly in the spring of 2020, that was like, nope. That's not happening anymore.
I tell you,
go ahead.
I was going to say, of all the things that have changed, there's one thing that sort of hasn't, and that is time. Time is the same in terms of, do you have time to read a book? Do you have time to watch a webinar? Do you have time to go on vacation? Do you have time to work on a project? Like most people, they just don't have, they prioritize so that they don't have time. So there's always a book they haven't read. There's always a project they haven't finished. But what we've found is over this last year, and this became really poignant to me in a Facebook group where a friend, Bob the teacher, had just finished mowing the lawn. And he came to type on in the Facebook group that he was listening to a podcast while he was mowing the lawn about affiliate marketing. And he was typing out the things that he learned on the podcast. Now, I teach affiliate marketing. It was my group about affiliate marketing. But Bob was mowing the lawn, and he was listening to someone else. Some other guru, voice was in his head while he was mowing the lawn. And he was absorbing knowledge and information. And it occurred to me that moment, that no matter how many projects, how frantic life is, there are millions of people who still exercise, they still commute, they still mow the lawn, and they don headphones while they're doing it. And they look for this thing to fill that time, whether it's how to do affiliate marketing or how to take care of like indoor houseplants, or they want to be entertained with a true crime podcast or a history podcast. But even though they don't have time while they're running at the gym, they're completely focused on what's the voice in their ear, that person that's guiding them through something or entertaining them. And to me, when I heard that Bob was listening to someone else teach him that, and realized I can't be that voice in his head unless I have something in that space, unless I have a podcast. And then, a lot of people will hear that and they'll think, well, shoot, I don't want to do an episode every week for the rest of my life. That sounds like a huge, like this big new thing that I would have to tackle. But I would like to challenge you with this concept. What if you took this one thing that you're really good at and you made 7 episodes all about the thing that you're most passionate about, and you put it out there in the world so that millions of people out there who want to know exactly that thing could just tune in and could start listening. And while they're being super, super attentive to your fixed 7-episode podcast, I mean, they might then come to your site because they want to learn more. Like, you become a friend of theirs at that point. You're the one helping them in their own life go from 1 to 100 or A to Z, or whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. So for me, no matter how crazy the world has gotten, there's always that moment where millions of people at the gym with their headphones on, learning from someone. And so with this kit, I want to help everyone out there who wants to entertain or educate have the tools necessary to just produce something, to fill that time for all of those people who need something on their drive to work, to just make life better.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things you mentioned there which I want to key into. First one is just this whole thing of being really generous, like having this attitude of generosity and bringing like what you have to share to this sort of new medium, the podcast medium. And the other one is that I completely agree with is that right now there's 2 different things that are combining that make podcasting work really well for people. One is that we are in a kind of social isolation. And so when we're doing stuff like we're working out at home, or we're going on long walks by ourselves, or like this has been more of the habitual thing. And many people actually haven't been doing the drive commute. So they've changed that route, that behavior into some other thing, which is pretty much of a solitary pursuit. So a podcaster can become one of your best friends. It's like this very intimate thing that you have, relationship that you're building with whoever it is, that you're talking to as a podcaster. And now you're in their ear and you're really speaking one-on-one to the people who you're talking to. And this is where I think podcasting is completely different than all of the other online mediums that exist.
So right now I'm writing, I also work for Podcast Magazine, and I'm writing an article about something that I think is entirely culturally podcast. And that is people who listen to a show for a period of time that they kind of fall in love with the show. They will save the final episode. Like, they won't listen to the final episode until like they're ready, because they know for them, like, I'm just right now I was talking to somebody on Twitter who just posted she was saving this last episode of a BBC program about the cinema, about the death of cinema. And she had just listened to it today, even though it had aired, a little bit ago. But she was waiting for that perfect time because she knew that she had this relationship with the podcast. Like, this doesn't happen on Netflix. You don't binge Netflix and then just wait to watch the last episode. You want to dive into the last episode. But with podcasters, there's a lot of people who wait. They hold that last one because they don't want it to end. They don't want that relationship to stop. And then they also want to make sure they're like in the perfect habitat to listen. They're not going to be interrupted on this final episode. And I always thought, just the concept of it made me think about writing this article, that there is a different relationship with a podcaster than there is binging Netflix, or binging some other medium. It's just not quite the same.
Yeah, I completely, that's great. There, the NPR thing about the driveway moment is real. People coming home and they're listening and whatever's going on, like the story is so compelling that once they arrive at their destination, they still sit in their car to finish.
For me, that was Paul Harvey in the 80s with the rest of the story. I would be late for a meeting that jeopardized my career to listen to the end of the rest of the story. And that's actually why I created the podcast that I do personally, is because I wanted my kids to have that same kind of, have access to that same kind of storytelling that just makes you go, whoa, that was awesome. But yeah, I would definitely miss a meeting because back then there was no way to hear the end of the story when Paul Harvey was off the radio. Like, you couldn't rewind.
Right.
There was it. If you didn't listen to it, it was over. That's
right. Well, yeah. I mean, those kinds of things, they're live, and they're just that one time, and there's no replay or rerun or archive or anything. Just like you're here, and if you want to listen to it, you have to do it right then. And in fact, we're quite spoiled now that pretty much everything that gets produced is now available, sort of in time, and you can go back and listen to it again or hear it again whenever you like.
Our kids have no concept of 7 p.m. Thursday nights. That's just not a thing,
Right.
What are we doing at 7 p.m.?
Right. Well, that's right. I mean, there were times, growing up where certain things happened on television and the whole country basically saw it.
Yeah.
The Beatles landing on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, that was a gigantic event. Or I don't know, when Michael Jackson was doing something in the 80s, these were huge things that, the next day everybody was talking about, because basically everybody you knew had actually seen it and seen it in that time, and seen it live in that moment.
Yeah, and if Tom Brokaw or Peter Jennings didn't say it, like it didn't exist. That was the news. It was no other news.
That's right. Yeah, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the Podcasters Kit. I'm going to put this, I made a special link here, so if people are interested in going to check it out, you can use this link, and I'll make sure that this is included in the show notes for this podcast episode of this, and also I'll have it in the comments if you happen to be seeing this on LinkedIn or on YouTube. And so this kit, just describe a little bit. There's over 40 people who have contributed to these different trainings.
So every year, I try to get 85% of the kit to be new people that I have never met before. And I've become really good at cold calling. And my goal is to just scour the internet for the courses that people are recommending, whether it's somebody in the Philippines or New Zealand or here in the States. So I'll look for things like, course about improving your vocalization so that I can find somebody that teaches this thing that would help you become a better podcaster, or, how to grow your podcast. Like, maybe there's somebody in the UK that has a really great take on how to grow your podcast. So I try to put together a myriad of things. There's nothing duplicated from one year to the next, and there's nothing duplicated in the kit. Like right now, there's not two things about one subject. Although what I will say is there might be 2 courses on how to start a podcast, and the reason that I allow a little bit of overlap is because I really, really like it when 2 different experts say the same thing. I like that moment when you're listening to one and then you listen to another and you remember, oh yeah, that other guy said that too. Like that, to me, that's like, okay, that's one of the more important moments, is hearing 2 people kind of like pinpoint one concept. But otherwise, there are products about monetizing. And I didn't want to do a product this year about how to monetize a podcast, because it seemed to me that when you do that, like all 5 ways get kind of a gloss over. So this year there's an entire course on using sponsors to help you make money on your podcast. There's one on how to create your own products, how to promote your own products on a podcast. There's one about joint ventures, how to make money with joint ventures. And then there's an administrative side of the kit. Like if you're going to have a podcast, it'd be nice to have a media release that you give a guest that says, hey, I can use your name and your likeness when I market the episode. Like just having that sheet, that template is in the kit. And there's one if you're going to have like a co-host, like you need an agreement for you and your co-host. And then there's a packet of email templates. So you have, here's the kind of emails that you send to your audience that says I have an episode coming. It's like 2 days out, all of those kinds of things. And then there's also launching your podcast, growing your podcast. 41 kind of different aspects of podcasting. Now, I will say, from a beginner standpoint, if you've never started, and it might sound like, wow, I have to take 41 courses in order to publish a podcast. But what you really need is a $20 mic, and you need some software like Audacity is free on the web, or GarageBand, which I use on my Mac, is free. And then you need a host. Like those are the only 3 things that you need in order to have a podcast. But once you do that, then you realize, okay, I really like this. Now I'd like it to sound better. How do I improve my sound quality? So like right now, as you're listening to me, I'm in my wife's studio, and it's probably a little bit echoey. I have learned that for me, when I record my podcast, that I actually record it in the walk-in closet upstairs, because all of the clothes hanging in the room like absorb the sound and helps give it like this deep, richer quality when you hear it. And then there's a couple pieces of free software online that I use, that I send my MP3 through my little saved file to, that actually adds a little bit of richness to it, kind of like an NPR sound. So the basics is easy, but when you want to, what I really want to do this, I want to make it part of my business, or I want it to sound good, or I want to learn how to grow it, or it'd be great if I had, more subscribers. That's why you need the kit. You don't need the kit to just record your voice and then, record it on your computer. Like that's anybody can do that. But when you're ready to say, okay, I got something to say, I want it to sound good, I'd like people to hear it, I'd like to be able to make some money from it, that's when the kit becomes really important for you. And it's everything that you need to know. Instead of going out there and just doing all the research on your own, which takes forever, you can just take one at a time and learn one thing at a time, implement and go, and in no time, you'll really, really enjoy what you've built.
Yeah. Well, interesting. What I love about the story of recording in the closet.
Oh man, it's the best place.
A lot of folks, when they're looking at the world of online business creation and online marketing, the message that is mostly shared is that you have to act bigger than you are, and you have to be really extrovertish in your way of being in the world, and you have to, join the ranks of people like Tony Robbins and Gary Vaynerchuk and be bigger than life, like have that kind of personality in order to succeed. And podcasting actually presents an alternative route. You can be the most introvert-oriented person in the world and literally, get a microphone and get in your closet and do something you're really good at, which is have a one-on-one conversation with someone. And that's really deep and meaningful, which introverts are super good at. And now you're in your sweet spot, and this is where podcasting kind of levels the playing field for every one of us in this way.
So I had a friend dial me up. She and her neighbor maybe was an art history major or a history major, and she was an art history major, and they decided that to spend more time together, they would create a podcast where they talked about a particular famous piece of art, and the art history lady would talk about the art part of that, and then the regular history lady would talk about what was going on in the world at the time that art was being created. And for the two of them, while they were creating this really cool podcast, it would also became a time for them to be together, like separate time for them, away from the family. They had this new project. And I just thought the idea of that is cool to me, because to me, there's nothing better than friends, right? You go through life, you can do all the stuff you can do all the stuff alone, or you can just have a friend. And for me, that concept has translated even into people who listen to my podcasts, who then comment to me on Twitter, have become friends because they like the kinds of things that I talk about. Like that's kind of that that gets them excited. It gets their juices flowing. They're really excited about that. So when a new episode comes out, and somehow they become friends. So for me, even the idea of relationships around podcasting is just kind of cool and important, and I've appreciated that part of this business.
Yeah, let's speak to that just briefly. I mean, how long have you been doing your own podcast, and what would you say has been like the biggest benefit for you personally, having been a podcast host?
Well, we had a podcast from 2013 to 2016, and we did 300 episodes or so. And it was popular. People liked it. But we were doing it because we thought we needed a podcast. Kind of like when you feel like you probably should be on Twitter, or like, yeah, I should probably be on Facebook. That kind of concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did it. And then about a year after this social media site, Ello, came and went. Like Ello was just here, and then it was like this big rush of momentum and energy to leave Facebook and join Ello, and then the next minute was gone. And we did a couple of episodes on Ello. So a year later, I'm looking at different ways to market the podcast. And I realized, why does anyone ever want to listen to this episode about Ello? Like, how do I market this going backwards? And I just got myself in a little bit of a marketing rut where I realized we are not producing evergreen content. We're like nobody watches yesterday's news. Like once it's over, it's over. So we stopped. Well, Rachel didn't want to stop because she really liked it, but I couldn't get my head around the idea of how do I get really, really long-term value out of this effort that we're putting into it. And it wasn't until that moment that I mentioned with Bob and his lawn mowing that I realized, okay, we need to get back into this because it's really important. And when I started tracing the path, which is my podcast now, it's not a business podcast like our other one. It's Paul Harvey. It's this thing that I've always wanted to create. I've always wanted to create these stories, this wow kind of feeling when you listen to something. So for me, it's almost been like a labor of love, like a passion project. Just telling these amazing stories that you just wouldn't hear anywhere else. And I guess, at 48 years old, at some point in time, you realize that you really have to do things that matter to yourself, not just the making money, and not just like the public stature in the community or something, but something that really means something to you, something that's part of your own legacy, your own life, like what's important. So for me, that's this, leaving my kids with maybe my voice, when I'm gone, but leaving my kids with these stories that I wish were still told. I wish there were more Paul Harveys, but there are a few. There's the Lore podcast. They have some great stories, but I'd like to be at some point one of those. And putting the kit together also helps me fill some holes where I know there are things that I need to work on. So I go find the course to put in the kit because I also need to use that course. So, there's that selfish part of it too. But, how else do you put something together unless you're really excited about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. This is a really good moment to wrap this up. Let me just bring this on again. This is the link to go and grab the Podcaster's Kit. You can, and again, I'll make sure this is in the show notes. And it'll be in the comments on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And so with all of this and this sort of energy around the podcast world, do you have any final words on just encouragement around if somebody's sitting on the fence, haven't started their podcast? Like I know for myself that it took me easily a year even though I was already doing videos and I was doing a lot of content marketing regularly, it took me about a year from the time that I thought I should do a podcast or I'd love to do a podcast to actually getting it out the door and launching it. And all I can think was I could have started much sooner. I could have made it much simpler than what I did, like all of that.
Yeah. Well, there isn't a better week to start than this week. Obviously, people say that because, they're trying to tell you that the most important time to start is now, right? Like people tell you that as
Sure.
a concept. But I'm saying this is the week of the kit where you could get everything that you'd ever need. And it's only through Saturday. Like it's over then and until next year. So this is the best time. But I would also tell you that there's a company called AudioBurst out of Israel. And they're a small company, but they're just these app developer guys. And they, at one point, figured out how to make an app that fit into another app. And when they were telling me about this, I was like, all right, well, I mean, great. Like, why does that matter? And they said, well, we also like podcasts. So we figured out how to make a podcast app that fits into another app. And I thought, all right, I still don't know what that means, but okay. And they said, well, do you know the Calm app? I'm like, yeah, it's got like 1 million downloads, 100,000 reviews on Apple Podcasts or whatever app or that iTunes download store. They said, well, if you download the Calm app and you're using it for meditations, or there's a button for music and there's a button for affirmations, well, now there's a button for podcasts. So everyone who has the Calm app now has this button for podcasts that they can listen to, and it's powered by AudioBurst. And then they said, that's just one. We have our app in lots of apps now, and maybe he said, and maybe the two most important that you're probably not aware of is that Dodge and Chevy are now going to have AudioBurst button in their in-car stereo in 2022. So when you're driving a new Chevy or Ford, you can actually just click a button like the radio and start listening to a podcast. So to me, like I said at the beginning, we're on the cusp of it becoming mainstream. I think when the word podcast becomes a button on your radio, like that's when it's mainstream. That's when it's normal. You just listen to something on your way to work. There's a button you press, or however that works. And to me, that means start a podcast and get your bugs out, right? Figure out what you like, how you do it. You're going to get like 9 episodes down the road, and you're like, you know what? I have this other idea. Let's do this. Let's record in the closet because we can make it sound richer. Or let's scrap that one. I have a new idea. This one's even better. But it always happens in the beginning. The first couple, you're like, all right, that was good, but I can make it better. And there is power in being invisible. Like, so before it's totally mainstream, like pick up the kit, really learn it, try something, figure out what your groove is, so that by the time it's mainstream, you are right there. You are what people want. You're ready to be listened to, because that mainstream moment is just seconds away.
Yeah, it's actually super exciting. I mean, we all get to have the chance to be our own version of Paul Harvey.
Yes.
and tell our stories, and basically be part of a meaningful conversation for the people who we would like to be engaging with.
Yeah, be a comedian in the car. I mean, comedians have great podcasts. Like, this is a great medium for you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. This is great. For you guys who are here watching and are in the replay, this is where you can grab the kit. Let me hit this button again. There we go. And again, this will be in the show notes. And this has been the live stream show. If you want to grab all of the archives and go ahead and binge these episodes, and if you actually like the, podcast version and that's your deal, go to thelivestreamshow.com and the entire archive is there. And you can go and hit all the past episodes here, and you can subscribe to all the future ones. If, on the other hand, you'd like to join me live and in person and be more interactive, then check out my YouTube channel. Just search for Brad Powell Video on YouTube and you'll find my channel and you will see the playlist for the live stream show. And I will see you in the future. We'll be going live next week on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, so long